Okay, well, I think people are probably going to continue to join us, which is absolutely wonderful. But I'm going to kick off because we've already had a chat as speakers and we know we're going to run out of time because we've got so much to say and we have got such a fabulous conversation ready to have. So I'd like to kick off by saying thank you so much for coming to support us today. As you can see, as speakers, we're all wearing pink and Lindsay is sporting a very fancy background there. So it is Wear It Pink Day today, and we're delighted to be able to support this. This is a topic that is going to be very hard for us to navigate. It's not an easy topic, but this is not a day that we wanted to go past at something big without making as much of a meaningful difference as we absolutely possibly can. It's a topic that's very close to our hearts here at Something Big. So thank you for joining. I'm Sally Pritchett and I'm the CEO at Something Big. We're a creative communications agency and the mission we're on is to make workplaces fairer, healthier and happier for everyone. And that's through inclusive and effective communication and employee communication. And that's something we're really passionate about. I am so delighted and grateful to my two speakers today and my two guests, and I'm going to do my darndest to give them as much space to do all the talking as possible. So I'm going to start with Lindsay. Would you like to introduce yourself, Lindsay? Tell us a bit about the role you're in and particularly your journey to why you're so passionate about this topic today.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Sally. Hey, it's really good to be here, everyone. Thank you for having me. So my name's Lindsay Bridges. I work at DHL Group. I'm actually the global head of HR for DHL Supply Chain. So I'm responsible for an HR team of about 2,500 people. And between us, we support around 190,000 colleagues in over 50 countries of the world. One of the divisions of DHL Group, which is an organisation of about 600,000 people worldwide. And the reason that I'm so passionate with about supporting our employees living with cancer is that I was diagnosed with breast cancer in early 2021. And Sally, at some point this morning, whether now or in a little while, I'll share a bit more about my story. But yeah, for sure, having been through this myself has probably really changed how I advocate for others with a cancer diagnosis, because I think when having lived through it, it's really made me see things differently.
Yeah, brilliant. And absolutely, Lindsay, we will chat more about that journey in a minute because and thank you so much for sharing your story today. And I'll move over to Anna. And Anna, do you want to tell us, you working with cancer, and do you want to tell us how you got involved in working with the charity Working with Cancer, who are doing absolutely phenomenal work in this space as well?
Yeah, so yeah, equally, really happy to be here. I have so much to say on this topic. I work as an associate at a company called Working with Cancer. We're a not-for-profit organisation, and I work primarily as a coach. So what we do is we support employees returning to work with cancer, and we also support employers in creating a better environment for people to return to work with cancer. And I feel very passionate about this from my own personal experience, because I also had cancer 9 years ago. I was diagnosed with a melanoma and had my own struggles emotionally after cancer, which is something that I think a lot of people don't understand and they miss as part of the person's returning to work, and it can have a huge impact. So that's kind of, and then I'm an HR background and I do coaching, so all of this tied in, it makes it perfect for me to be supporting people in this role.
Thanks, Anna, and thank you both for being so candid today. I'm going to stop sharing screen because I really want to be able to let everybody see our faces a bit better. But, I'm so grateful to you both for being so open with us today on your stories. And I know we're going to have a phenomenal conversation because I've spoken to you both about your stories. So shall we kick off? I want to start by talking about a fact and a piece of information that Something Big came across last year, which was the Working with Cancer pledge, which has been done in association with the Working with Cancer charity and not-for-profit organisation. And came to light that there was these two rather startling facts. One was that half of employees feel afraid to tell their employers about their diagnosis. And the second was that a third of employees feel really isolated during their journey. And that just broke our hearts, because this is a brutal journey, you know, going through treatment, etc., through diagnosis, through recovery. It's a brutal enough journey for anybody as it is. And then to not feel supported or psychologically safe at work just felt like that was the sort of final straw for me. And that was why we felt so passionately about this topic. And being comms experts, we think there's a huge problem here with stigma, with the confidence to have better conversations. So if I may, I'm going to start with you, Lindsay, because you did something that took a lot of courage after your diagnosis and as you were on your treatment. You did something that was really brave to start the conversation going in your organisation. Would you mind telling us a bit about that?
Yes, sure I would. So at the time when I was diagnosed, it was during COVID, and at the time I was working as a HR leader for our UK business, and I had a team of about 350 people in the UK working for me in HR, predominantly female, 95% female. And when I did the maths, looking at the stats of the number of that group who would get breast cancer in their lifetime, it was like 40 or 45 people. And I was like, 40 or 45 people in my team. And I was quite horrified by that. And knowing that, early detection saves lives when it comes to breast cancer, for sure. I thought, what could I do? So it was COVID, so we were all working from home and we were all on calls. So we had a town hall call. We invited all 350 HR people on that. And I was in the middle of chemotherapy at the time, so I removed my wig. I love my wig, by the way. It was a real benefit to have a wig. I didn't have to wash my hair every morning. I removed my wig and I very emotionally talked for 6 or 7 minutes about what I was going through. Very directly, very bluntly, very candidly to the team. And the purpose of that was to allow them to see that it's okay to talk about it. And if I can talk about it, I hope that would encourage and inspire them to talk about it. But actually, more importantly, to encourage them to go and, have their mammogram if they're entitled and can take it, not to avoid that appointment, and to learn how to self-examine, to learn how to, to look and notice for changes in your breasts. And when you see something, have the courage to do something about it.
Yeah, I think, thank you for sharing that, and also the courage that took, and so emotionally charged at the time. You were in the midst of it. You had not had time to process how you felt about all of that at that point, but that's what it took, and I think that started a conversation within your organisation, and I believe that following that session, you had many people follow up with you, talk to you, send you personal messages about other experiences in their family and things like that.
Even to last week, this week, in fact. I mean, I do find that people reach out to me a lot, either people going through a diagnosis themselves, or others in our business who've got friends or family going through a diagnosis. And I'm always really happy just to talk to people about my experience, and just sometimes actually it's just listening. Yeah, it's just listening.
Brilliant. So that is a great way to demonstrate the difference it took to have that open conversation, because I would imagine that prior to that, that team of 350 women, or more or less women in your team, there were other examples of it happening, but that conversation hadn't started.
Absolutely not. And interestingly, Sally, there were 5 others going through 4 others going through it at the same time, and we formed a little chat group and we shared between us our experiences, kind of, live as an informal support group.
Wow, that's amazing. And Anna, if I can turn to you, because working with cancer charity, work with lots of people transitioning back into the workplace, post recovery, etc. What are some of the things that you're hearing from those people that you feel like the experiences they're having, their common challenges?
Yeah, just before I say that, can I just say, Lindsay, I think what you did is really amazing. And I think as leaders, we sometimes underestimate the impact our vulnerability has on other people. So for a leader to be able to create that space and be that kind of role model where you can be vulnerable sends such a positive message. So I really, I think it's amazing what you did. Back to your question. So some of the challenges, there's so many, and I think the main challenge stems from misunderstanding, people not understanding what cancer recovery looks like and what it feels like. And that's both the person who's experiencing it and the employer. For the person who's experiencing recovery and when they're going back to work, and everyone's different, everyone's experience is unique, but mostly people start thinking about going back to work once their cancer treatment's finished. And this is actually one of the most difficult times for them. It's the moment where they've been surviving this trauma and they're now at the time where they're kind of processing their recovery. They've got side effects, chronic fatigue often, but there's a real loss of identity, a loss of confidence. And lots of people say this is actually the hardest part, getting back to some kind of normality. And from the sort of employee's perspective, there's a real desire and impatience. I want to get back to work. I really want to get back to work, coupled with fear, genuine fear of recurrence is right there at that time, probably the hardest part. Terrified it's going to come back, worried that you're going to do too much. What if I do too much and I work myself too hard? What if I get stressed? And and a lot of people do link stress with their cancer coming back. So there's this real tension, but desperation to get going. I want to get back to work and potentially push themselves too hard. From the employer's perspective, they know maybe the employee's been off for 12 months and in their eyes, oh, okay, they're ready to come back now. Possibly they look okay. Well, this is all right. There might be a little bit of pressure for them to come back, but there's certainly a lack of awareness as to how fragile that person's state is. Although they're very capable of going back to work, it needs to be handled compassionately and with communication. That is the most important thing. And often employers will, it's not uncommon for an employer to suggest a 4-week phased return to work, for example, which rarely is that enough. I mean, we advocate for 12 weeks phased return as a minimum. And in my experience, when I've seen people go through that, it's great, it's perfect. But there's a misunderstanding about the recovery. Recovery is not linear. It goes up and down and round, and you can have 2 good days and then 4 really bad days for no apparent reason. And so managing that when you get back to it, the fluidity is quite hard for the person who's had the cancer and for the employer to try and manage this. So the communication is so important. And one thing that we always say to the person going back to work is don't push yourself too hard. If you think you can do X amount, do less, because the worst thing you can do is go back and do too much. And often that's, there is this tension because both people want this, but it's not in anyone's best interests. So yeah, that's a few. There's the communication, there's people, like you said, the stigma, that stigma is real. People often don't know what to say when someone comes back. And I always say to the person, be very clear with whoever it is, your line manager or HR, what do you want people to know? How do you want people to talk to you even? From my experience, the employer is desperate. Whenever I've worked with an employer, they are desperate for, please just tell me, how do I help? What do I do? They really want some help with the narrative.
Yeah. So there's so much here to pick up on, and already we've talked about communication, and it's going to thread throughout this whole conversation. But I think that you've used one of the magic words, which was non-linear, and I think that's something we should just perhaps touch on, both of you. So we see this, and I think as a workplace, we're getting better at this with other things. We know that parenting, coming back after maternity, not linear. If you've worked in HR, that is not not linear for employees to just come back. They're not the same person pre and post having children, and childcare falls apart and other things. So we understand that that's going to be a bumpy ride. We understand that mental health is not linear. We get that needs more support, and it's the same here by the sounds of it. Both employer and employee want to make this work. They want to just transition back into work, whatever that is. They want to kind of go, give me the clarity of, are you working 4 days a week for 12 weeks, or what is it? But it isn't going to be as simple as that, because 1 week that works and 1 week that doesn't work, and neither person knows what's coming. Is there anything, Lindsay, you've been able to do from a sort of workplace situation to help managers to understand that and to support that?
Yeah, we do quite a bit. In prep for this call, I reached out to a couple of our larger countries, the ones who employ more, larger numbers of employees, just to see what we do. And we do quite a lot. It's still reactive more than proactive, I think, but we do quite a lot in providing managers with signposting information. So here's what to expect. Here's what to talk about. Here are some things. So we provide, managers' guides, and we really push hard our kind of EAP type programs to encourage people to also seek support and help. So I think we do that pretty well. I think the one thing I would say, and it really resonates with what you said, Anna, it's not linear. It's very up and down, and it's hard to predict and hard to expect. I think it's also a point, though, some people don't actually need a phased return, and some people can just come back into it as well, and that surprises maybe them and their managers. So this is so different for everyone. You can't sort of say, here's what we do with a returning cancer patient, because it's not like that. It's very much an individual discussion around their individual treatment and circumstances. And I think, Anna, to the point you made, that's one of the toughest things to manage, isn't it? It's not so easy just to say, here's the policy. It doesn't work that way.
No, it doesn't. But I think it can certainly be streamlined more. And I think that's the problem. I often work with people who, and it still amazes me, are in a company that have no policy for managing long-term sickness, let alone someone returning to work with cancer. And I have so many situations where someone's gone back to work and they're maybe speaking to their manager, about, I'm ready to come back to work, I think, have these conversations, and the manager says, oh, no, you don't want to speak to me about that, you need to speak to HR. So then they go to HR, and HR say, oh, no, that's not for me, I don't deal with this, you need to go back to your manager. And they have no one that's going to be sort of held accountable for supporting them. And that's to me such an easy thing to correct and to streamline, and would make such a huge difference and create so much stress, so much unnecessary stress. When who am I talking to? If they've had the confidence to perhaps, as we do in our coaching, we create a space for people to talk about what they might need, because often they really don't know. They don't know who they are, let alone what adjustments they might need at work, or how many hours they can work. So once they've actually got the confidence to say, this is what I need, this is what I want, that they've got no one to say it to, or no one that's going to listen. And that,
Anna, that sounds like that's takeaway number one. So if everyone on the call is listening and writing notes, takeaway number one is go and have a look in your organization. What guides do you have for managers? And what is the clarity between HR and managers, that they're not going to ping pong somebody between the two? Because if we go back to that working with cancer pledge feedback, feeling isolated is partly towards, well, nobody seems to know what to do with me, and I feel like I'm the first one, and all of that kind of stuff. So I think the first takeaway is have those guides, but give that clarity to everyone in the business.
Yeah, and just add to that, I have so many people that they have this added layer of stress with this admin because there isn't anyone. It can be, things like, I'm doing a phased return. Am I going to get paid for the hours I don't work? Oh, I don't know. Speak to HR. Oh, I don't know. And, can I use my holiday to substitute it? Can I use my sick pay? All these questions, and they mount up, and they've got no one, and in this grand scheme of things, in a big, busy corporation, if no one's accountable for this, it's not a question that anyone's going to really spend that much time on. And the person ends up, I hear it so much, I feel like such a burden. I'm like a problem. Or so-and-so told me I'm a problem.
Oh gosh. Okay.
Added to, you know, if you didn't feel bad enough already.
Enough about everything else. Right. Okay. So those guides are critical. And, you know, a guide for an employee as well. You know, we know you're coming back, transitioning in. These are some of the questions you might have, because they won't be the first person that's ever had to come and have a phased return. This shouldn't feel like it's the first time. I'm going to move us on from managers then to colleagues, because certainly in talking to both of you and various other people, the other thing I'm hearing is that because there's this fear and stigma around the whole conversation, some people are just going, I think I might say the wrong thing. I don't want to say the wrong thing, so I'd rather not say anything at all. And I'm hearing horrific stories of people just sort of walking back into the workplace and sort of almost everyone's just avoiding the subject like it's some elephant in the room and they don't know what to say. So what can we say here to get colleagues having more confidence? Lindsay, it looks like you had that experience a bit, maybe.
Do you know, one of the things that I have a number of things in my head around this, but something that I think we need to think about is the visibility. The problem when you start chemotherapy, if you're working through treatment, which many people still do, and I did all the way through, if you have chemo and you lose your hair, so there's a lot of trauma around losing your hair in the first place and what you do with that. And I think that's well written about and well researched, but it's quite shocking because suddenly, from an emotional point of view, you've lost control as the cancer patient in terms of telling what's going on. Suddenly it's very visible. So I think being able to support people around that, and how do we give the patient back control? But the one thing I'd like to mention, which I found even more difficult, and it would apply to anybody who's returning if they've had chemo and lost the hair. Your hair grows back. And for me, it grew back and I was wearing my wig, loved my wig, all great. And then it was like, I need to take this wig off because it's damaging my regrowth. My hair is about this short. Yeah. And that was so much more difficult than losing my hair and transitioning to a wig or a scarf in the first place, because I've got this horrible hair that I really hated, you know, and everybody knows that you've been off sick, whether they know you've been, you know, or what you've been through, whether you've told them or you haven't told them. It's an incredible visible time and you can't mask it or hide it in any way. And I think for me, that is the most difficult. So my advice, and the best conversation I ever had with a colleague around this was when I told him I'd been diagnosed with breast cancer. By the way, saying the words breast in a team of when you're the only female is a big deal as well. So we'll come back to that at another point. In a male-dominated business. Nobody says that. But actually saying this, my colleague called me and he said, really sorry to hear about your illness. How do you want me to talk to you about it, Lindsay? And he gave me control. And that made me feel really good around, well, actually, I'm okay to talk about it. Or if I'd been a different person, I might have said, I don't want you to mention it, just treat me as normal. But giving the patient control is important. But then remembering the hair thing, if that happens, is a real issue in that patient no longer has control. And that has a big emotional, for me, a major emotional impact.
Yeah. And I really love that, because that's almost big shout out to everyone listening. This is takeaway number 2, which is, rather than say nothing, you know, if we can tell our colleagues and you know, if we can create a bit more confidence about having conversations, the starting point might well be to give that person the control to say, hey, listen, this elephant in the room isn't going to be an elephant. Let's get that on the table. How would you like me to deal? Because every person I've spoken to and supported has been different. Some of them use humor, some of them don't use humor. Some of them would say, listen, I'm going to be on a client call. I'd really like it if you could just tell that client beforehand so I don't have to say anything. You know, sometimes people are saying, oh, you're off for a few days. Are you going anywhere nice? And they don't want to say, well, actually, no, I'm having some chemo, treatment. So, sometimes people say, a colleague could do a real favor by going, can you just get that awkward conversation out the way for me? Or others will say, hey, listen, I'm really quite happy to make that conversation happen myself. But, that being guided by someone and giving that control back to you, Lindsay, I think that's advice number 2. It feels really key. especially at a time when you didn't have much control.
And if I might just add, sorry, one more thing. I work in a very international team, and I noticed stereotypically different cultures were more or less willing to ask or not ask about it. And if you are in an international team, just thinking about that, don't be offended if somebody asks you because their culture is typically more direct, or doesn't ask you because their culture is a little bit more reticent. That I remember a call, and being on a multinational call, I was getting all these messages from people who were all non-British, and none of the Brits said a thing. And it made me think, well, don't they care? And actually, it's not that they don't care; they just didn't know what to say, and we're very reserved, aren't we? Yeah. So it was that was a bit of a learning and a takeaway for me, and just typical cultures in international world.
Yeah, and you've hit on another thing. Sorry, and Anna, I'll go on to this to you now. But that don't you care? That's what we don't want anybody in the workplace to ever feel. And Anna, I think this would be a really good one for us to. I know that in our briefing call we had a little chat about this. And I said, isn't it interesting that in so many areas of diversity and inclusion in all the different communities that feel a bit underrepresented or misrepresented, we've moved the conversation on a long way, I think. And yet in this scenario, we've sort of not managed to make as much progress. Do you want to touch on that? Because, that was an interesting conversation we had on that.
Yeah. And I think a lot of it does follow on from that control sense. When someone goes through cancer, they lose control of everything to do with their body. So the return to work, giving them back some control is huge. It's really, really significant. But yeah, about the sort of those conversations, and I know I came up with a theory, and it is my own, so it's up for debate. It's just
I loved your theory.
When we talk about sort of the Me Too movement and mental health in the workplace and harassment, discrimination, and homophobia, these are conversations which people are much more comfortable having, it appears, whereas cancer is still the one that's really, really uncomfortable. And I thinking about, well, why is this? And thinking that, well, maybe there's something about our need to try and fix people's problems, right? So when someone's being harassed at work, for example, we've got, we can make a complaint about that. We can deal with that. Someone's getting bullied. We can deal with that. Someone's got mental health problems. We have so much mental health awareness training. Most people know what vocabulary to use, what to say to someone. But with cancer, I do sometimes think, it cannot be fixed. A colleague, you can't say anything that's going to fix the cancer. It's there, and it's awful, and it's a potential death sentence. It's something that is just so awful. There's nothing we can do to fix it. So I think sort of thinking of that as the basis, then to say, okay, so what can I say? And what you can say, and you've touched on it beautifully, Lindsay, is how can I help make your transition back to work better? And how do you feel about coming back to work? Because they are coming back to work. They're not here to discuss their cancer or to talk about treatment. They may want to, or they may not want to, but they really want to come back to work, and they want it to go well. So as a colleague, I think to be able to say something like that, and also you've just confirmed that, Lindsay, in your experience, that's huge. You can't fix this. You can't make it better, actually. It is crap. It is awful. But what you can do is you can make that person's transition back to work better, just by being there, just by supporting and I think being educating people on things they can say.
And you picked up, and this is a great transition into this conversation, but you used the word vocabulary a minute ago. And it reminds me as well that at the beginning of many of the diversity and inclusion sort of journeys we were going on with some of our clients, there was always a desire, give me a guide of things I can say. I need a glossary of things I can say and things I can't say. People desperately want to find the right language and the right vocabulary. And there is no right and wrong. That we can have a great conversation now about some of the things that are really in the don't say camp. And I think we should say that. But often as well, I'm seeing that some people are saying I'm a survivor, or I'm living with cancer, or I'm fighting it, and others are saying I'm not fighting it, I'm living with it. And so there isn't a grayer area over here which says there is no dictionary here of language and vocabulary that will be personal to each individual. But let's talk about some of the things that we shouldn't say, because I've heard some horror stories. I'm going to just use the word apricot kernels here, but I'm hearing, that have you tried? Or your colleague Anna talked about the pity face, oh, that's really sad, and so what are some of the things that you both find commonly you kind of go, oh, please, let's try and avoid these things here?
Well, I have a list as long as my arm.
Oh
but
dear, that's not good.
And I think this is shared with my colleagues working with cancer. We all have these, oh God, you didn't really have that. Someone said that to you. Oh. But one that we talked about before, actually, and it's something that I think someone can say with the best intention, but actually it lands so differently. And that's when someone's come back to work and someone else might be saying, oh, my marriage is falling apart, I've got this really difficult thing going on in my life. Oh, but it's nothing compared to you, what you've got going on. And that's, I think it's something about, we don't want to be the main character in every trauma story. We have our own, you have yours, and that comes up a lot, and you can kind of understand why someone says it.
Yeah.
And it's there's no bad intent meant, but it's really, I don't want to be that character. Yeah. Let you be that character for a moment, and I'll retire. So that's just an example.
That's a good one. Yeah.
That's but then obviously there are some really awful things that people say. I'll just give you a few. One of them, and this, when someone told me they've been told this, I thought the person was saying it to me, and I was crushed. So someone said, you're not the person you used to be, which that just, hits every nerve, because you're not the person you used to be. That's how you feel. But that can be so hurtful. I've had another one. You're so lucky having time off for chemotherapy, because you'll miss year end.
Oh gosh. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Add that to the list of pretty tone deaf.
Have they told you how long you've got? A director, this was at a director who had cancer. Does this mean we need to find a new director?
Oh God.
We thought we'd tell the team you're taking a short sabbatical. We don't want to frighten people with the whole cancer thing. No. Don't you just want to pack in the job and focus on your bucket list? Don't share anymore. But these are things that that people say, and genuinely, I think they're being unkind, maybe insensitive, a bit thoughtless, but it kind of does show how misinformed people are, and how we have come a long way, but the fact that these things are still being said, it just shows that we've still got a very long way to go in the narrative that we use, the narrative around cancer. I mean, yes, we want to normalize it, but there is definitely something about supporting people in how to have these conversations. I don't think you'll ever change those people who said that. But.
Well, I mean, I find that scary that these are the things that are still being said today. This is what is going on, but it does lend itself to going back to the Working with Cancer pledge insight about a third of people feeling isolated in their journey or afraid to tell anyone. If this is the kind of reactions they're getting, or maybe they're seeing other colleagues get ahead of them, and therefore they're like, well, I know what they did to Susan, so I'm not gonna say anything. I'm gonna put my wig on and keep quiet. I can see why those sort of stats are so horrific. And I'm also thinking, I'm very glad we're running this session today. I'm very glad that there's 120 odd people that have joined us today, because I kind of think, well, we are moving that conversation on. So, Lindsay, what do you think to flip that? Because that's pretty horrific, right? And I'd like to think at DHL, because I know DHL very well and they're a great company. I'd like to think better conversations are happening in DHL. What do you think are some of the best things that are being said and supported?
Well,
Let's give ourselves some hope.
I was going to say it's better to say something than nothing at all, but actually I don't disagree, Anna. I'm taking that back because some of those things it's better to say nothing. But I mean, generally speaking, and I do feel very fortunate. I've never had anything like that said to me or heard that in our business. But what I think is a really nice thing, and people, particularly if I was at an event last week where I have seen some people I haven't seen for many months, and they often say to me, "How's your health?" And that's a great statement, because you can just say, you can be as short or as long as you want on that, but and it can be as broad or not. So I quite like it when people say that to me, I must admit. But I do go back to my, when you're talking to a colleague who's going through treatment or just coming back from treatment, is just, I really do passionately believe, and I'm going to say it again, give them control. How do you want me to talk about this? Do you want to talk about it or not? Do you want me to? I don't want to ignore you, but I don't want to make you uncomfortable either. So tell me what you would like. I think that is really important.
Also, just sorry to interrupt, but that principle is really significant as well in how a manager manages the person's return to work. And I always say to the manager, let them lead the conversation. Let them tell you what they want to happen. Let them lead the way. And when I hear someone come to me and say, "Oh, my manager said, what do you want?" Oh, I just great. They're letting them take charge. Tell me what you need. Tell me how you want your colleagues to communicate. Tell me what adjustments you might need. Tell me how your phased return might look. Giving them that, again, it's control. And with nearly all the work I do, I'm saying, let's give you back some control here.
Yeah.
And if I could just add or build on that, I think a great question for managers to ask is, hey, what's your ongoing treatment going to look like? Because I know, I have treatment now still every 6 months. I have daily stuff which gives me side effects, but I've got ongoing treatment every 6 months. So every 6 months I have to say to my boss, hey, I can't travel that week because I've got bloods on Wednesday, infusion or bloods on Monday, infusion on Wednesday. And it always is like, oh, yeah, but I thought you were better.
Yeah.
Please don't say you thought I was better. But that's, I think, making managers, and to be fair, before my diagnosis, I had no clue that cancer treatment went on and on and on. No idea. So I don't expect people to know this, but having that conversation about, well, what is next for you, and making sure you understand from your team member or your colleague or your employee coming back is, what does that picture look like, so that you're not taken by surprise every time they say they need a bit of time off for this or that appointment, and you don't make them feel odd about it. I think that's a real lesson for me as an individual.
And you've beautifully segued me there, Lindsay, into another topic that's been huge, which is the different stages. So this is not like you're going to go off, have a bit of treatment, come back, that's it. There are different stages here. There's the diagnosis, there's the treatment, there's the recovery. And then, of course, one of the things I did want to touch on today, because I think this is a really painful period, is that sort of annual checkup and how you might be feeling beforehand, afterwards, etc., how you come to terms with it. We've talked, I know with a lot of people, I've talked about this fear of reoccurrence and not trusting your body, every ache and pain that you have, to kind of think, oh God, is it back? How can we help managers and colleagues to understand this is not linear, but it's also different stages? We could be, like you say, 2 years later and everyone's like, oh yeah, but that's ages ago and her hair's grown back and, she doesn't have her treatment anymore. And they don't understand why you might be being a little emotional or grumpy or something like that, for a few weeks before your annual check or something like that. So it's not quick, is it?
No, and it's a really good point, because it's even been an eye-opener for me, the people I work with, where treatment, it's not just medication. There is a lot of active treatment still going on, and scans, and endless things, that medication that has side effects. Some people take medication for life which has side effects, 10 years or 5 years. And you know, I someone I was recently working with, that sort of 18 months, person was 18 months into being back at work, and the manager said to them, how long is this cancer going to go on for? So you're right, it's something I hadn't really considered, to be honest, about, you know, this isn't the end, this is another phase. And yes, and it's about keeping that communication open, perhaps having regular, well, you should be anyway, but having regular check-ins, the manager with that person. And yes, the person being open about, this is what my ongoing treatment plan looks like, because there will be appointments, they will need time off, and how is that going to be managed? And you know, let's hope it's not a case of, oh, I've got an appointment or checkup, and do I tell HR, do I tell my manager? Hopefully by then there's, you know, that one point of contact who is going to kind of be by their side, you know, as you would hope a manager would be, supporting them.
I think, Anna, at one point we talked a little bit in our pre-call about a buddy. And the idea in a large organization, somebody who has potentially been through this before, but has also got access to HR, to your manager and colleagues, and to be able to go, hey, I can help answer some of these questions, and I can help you navigate some of this complicated stuff, because you shouldn't feel isolated on this journey. And like you say, if every year you've got to go back and sort of almost relive it internally at the workplace, as well as what you're going through externally, that just makes it worse, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think the buddy system is so good, because there's something quite comforting about, you know, once you've had cancer, talking to someone who's also had cancer. It's like we get it. And that can be, someone that's been through the process before. And you talk about the loneliness, you know, cancer, the whole experience of cancer is a really scary, lonely place. So to know that you would go back to work and potentially have this buddy, someone who gets it, I think that would be invaluable if employers were able to, you know, create that sort of structure. I don't know what you feel, Lindsay, if that would have, you know, in your position, been helpful for you.
I think in our business, I think we have that informally, but not formally. But I think you're absolutely right. How can we make people feel comfortable in it? For me, it's about creating a space that people feel comfortable in talking about it. So I'm one of those people who's on 10 years worth of tablets. I get my prescription every month, and it says take daily till September 2031, which is a little bit of a shocking thing that they put on the prescriptions in the UK. But the tablets block estrogen, and they give me sore joints, and I can't sit for very long. Right now I'm stretching my legs because I'm sitting. And so I often have to get up and walk around the room in meetings, and I'll typically say to people, hey, I've got to stretch a bit because I've got no estrogen in my body because of my tablets. So, you know, don't mind me walking around. And I keep it very light, but people tend to now know that. And I think that if you can feel that you're in that space, or if we as companies and organizations can create the space that our colleagues can say these things, then that again, it normalizes the conversation, and it just makes it not a big deal. And I think that's actually really important. And Sally, you had an idea when we were talking on the pre-call. You said you'd heard of a manager who noted down the approximate time of somebody's annual checkup. I've never thought of that, and I love it, because knowing when that is. Now, the only thing I would say is, if my manager asked me, how was your checkup yesterday, and if it wasn't good, I'm not sure I want to be able to tell them. So one of my lessons learned when I was going in for my kind of confirmation of results after the biopsies, I told a lot of people that I had my consultant's appointment that day. And it was really bad news. I mean, it was the worst news. And I wasn't emotionally in a state to be able to answer the 57 text messages I had from very well-being people going, how was your appointment?
Very well-intended.
And to be fair, they were well-intended, and I'd set it up because I told them when I was going to the hospital, you know? And so that was my only caution, is around you know, how do you just make that balance of caring and inquiring without sort of putting them on the spot if they're not ready to talk about it? And there's no right or wrong answer for that. It is just something you have to play through. But my advice now to people is just think through, if you're telling people exactly when you're going in for your appointment, are you ready for the questions that you will inevitably get from caring people?
Yeah. And I think knowing when the annual checks might be, it's not necessarily, we're not guiding managers to point it out, to say anything, etc. necessarily. Again, be guided by the individual, but to perhaps notice and be aware, instead of going, why is that person a bit grumpy, or why are they snapping with me, or why are they just, they don't seem to be on their game right now. And it, for them, it's to be able to go, actually, there's something probably else at play here. And they might say, hey, how are you doing? Do you need some extra time at the minute? Or, you know, is there anything I can do? And just to go back to that being guided. Now, I knew we were going to run out of time, and this conversation is, I could go on for hours because there's so much here. But I think I'm going to try and ask you both, if you had some advice for employers and for colleagues in the workplace, if you could sum up, sort of like, imagine a workplace where some of those dreadful things that Anna had shared earlier on are being said. What would be the sort of area that you would advise? Should we start with you, Anna? I'm going to pick on you, sorry.
Yeah, no, I'm just thinking, so if it was one of the examples that I used, an environment like that, I would start with some kind of training, give them some understanding, train these people, but inform these people, you know, help them to understand what cancer recovery is like. So that they don't end up, making these awful statements, making these really silly assumptions, but just help them. You know, those are coming from people who really don't have any idea, whether it's because they, you know, are not very emotionally intelligent or whatever it might be. But yeah, I think, you know, start with helping the colleagues, the managers, probably the managers in the first instance, to understand what the person is going through and what to expect and what they might need. To try and see it from their point of view would be the place to start. And I think that's the first thing. And then you get into the more, you know, the more nuanced stuff about the phased return, about the fatigue, about the non-linear recovery, about the control. You know, you could go on and on and on. But I think start with just understand more, take the time to understand what is actually happening. This isn't, you know, I have had someone say cancer is just like a common cold now. No, it's not. No. Yes, to someone who had cancer.
And I think some of these things that you're sharing are showing me that there is still a huge lack of understanding and education. There's too much ignorance, if you like, around cancer in the workplace generally. So let's start from a place, which is what we've done with many other topics in, say, for example, diversity, inclusion, and well-being in terms of mental health, etc., menopause. You know, we're getting the idea now that the workplace isn't really supporting some of these topics because it didn't have a good understanding. So I think the first thing I'm hearing from you then is get out there and do some training. And Lindsay, what would be your advice for workplaces?
So I have two things, actually. One is there are some amazing resources out there. So lack of training from your organization is not an excuse as a manager or HR leader. Just go and look at Macmillan. I used Macmillan a lot. Macmillan, I've got two things that I love about it. One is their information. So when you Dr. Google things, that's bad. Don't do that. Okay, don't rely on Google. Use a reputable source. Macmillan Breast Cancer Now. There's a number of reputable ones out there. I happen to favour Macmillan. Macmillan also has a really good online community where you can chat with other people, and it has got an area of kind of friends and family going through it if you want to have a chat and community with others who are supporting other people. So I would say that. My one piece of advice, though, is to those of us who are actually diagnosed with cancer, is don't be a superhero. Okay. And I need to take my own advice sometimes. In terms of, you know, it's okay to ask for help. It's okay to not be able to do some of the things that you were able to do before. It's okay to explain that and talk about it, but try and don't be a superhero and take the help that's out there. I had so much help and support from amazingly brilliant colleagues at DHL. I couldn't even start to name them. The list is so long. And it made me realize that I didn't have to be a superhero and that I could rely on other people. And actually people really want to help. And there's loads in the chat, Sally, but I did notice one in the chat around, will we discuss men's experiences like prostate cancer? I think what we're discussing today goes for any type of cancer diagnosis. It's not unique to breast cancer, even though it's Wear It Pink Day today. But, I have a colleague at the minute with a prostate cancer diagnosis, and we talk a lot about what that means. And, you're trying to you have this shared experience. And it means it's slightly easier to talk about it. But I think the same things that Anna's talked about, apply to any type of cancer, I would say. But please don't be a superhero. Ask for help.
And Lindsay, I mean, that I'm so glad you used that phrase. We had a little chat because I had some surgeries back in 2012. And I think this says something about where we are today in 2024 versus 2012, because as a leader of my organization, I did not want to frighten my team. I did not want to frighten my customers. I kept absolutely quiet, didn't tell anybody. Luckily, in those days, we didn't have things like Teams. So when we did a call, it was literally a voice call. Nobody could see. So I was doing calls from bed having just done surgery. I did one which was pretty much after waking up from a general anaesthetic. God knows whether I was on my game or not. But I very much, and Lindsay, we had this conversation about if I did that again today, I would be so different, because I think today I feel like I wouldn't want to wear that cape, and I would want to see it as an opportunity to be vulnerable with my team as well. So I'm going to try and wrap up because I'm worried that we're going to run out of time. But the first thing I'm going to say is I promise you that as guests and myself, we will go to every comment in the chat, which I have not been able to keep up with. And if there are questions in there, we will absolutely answer them. We're going to share this video with you anyway. So when we do the follow up, we will share all of our answers. I'm also just going to put a slide again up so that you can carry on the conversation with any of us. So these are our QR codes that take us straight to our LinkedIn profiles. So please do feel free to carry on, connect with us, follow us, etc. I'm sure all three of us would be only too happy to carry on conversations and answer questions, etc. And to wrap up as well, I'm going to ask for kind of two favors, I suppose. And I want to end us on a really positive, empowering thing that we can all do. One of the first things we can do is we can celebrate Wear It Pink Day. And this QR code will take you to the donations for Breast Cancer Now. Breast Cancer Now are working really hard. Their mission is to make it that everyone that is diagnosed with breast cancer by 2050 survives and lives, and also is supported to live well. And what's really important for us all to remember, because it's Friday and we're going into the weekends, is that actually in the last 50 years, breast cancer survival rates have doubled. And that's because of better awareness, earlier detection, better screening, better treatments, etc. So, every penny that we are giving to this charity or any charity is going towards making that a better situation for everyone in the future. So we can make a meaningful difference by doing that. And the second favor I'm going to ask everybody is that whether you are coming on this call because you're in HR or because you're a communications leader or somebody that is just very passionate in your workplace, I want you to go back to your organizations and advocate for better employee communication, whether that's awareness, whether that's having an ERG group around you, or having a topic come out of well-being, sharing, celebrating Wear It Pink Day next year. We have run campaigns, and I'm delighted that DHL are so proactive in this space. DHL, as an entire organization around the world, have about 600,000 employees. That is a lot of people being diagnosed and going through cancer and recovering out the other end. And I really am delighted delighted that they do so much work in this area, but we've also worked with loads of other companies and run really successful campaigns on men's health and women's health, etc. So please, from today, go and advocate for better communication within your organisation. So all of those dreadful things that Anna has just shared with us are not being said in your organisation. I think there were some tremendous takeaways on this call as well around training, and as employees ourselves and as colleagues, you know, I think Lindsay used the phrase, how's your health? And I know that as a British person, I'll often go, oh, how are you? And that just means hello often. It doesn't really mean any more than that. But just that phrase, how's your health, says to me that would open a completely different conversation with a colleague or a friend or a loved one, etc. So shall we wrap up? I've done pretty well because we've got 3 minutes. So I would love you to use those 3 minutes to really thank and show your appreciation for our 2 guests today who have shared so much of their personal stories and experiences, etc. Thank you. Look at all those wonderful emojis. You've done a great job, ladies. And in seriousness, thank you so much for making a meaningful difference today, because that really has hopefully helped all the people that have got huge organisations and colleagues around them. And I think we hopefully have started a bit of a movement here to get better communication and have better conversations. Fabulous. Thank you so much. We will come back to your questions, I promise, and share all of those. I can see that the chat function.
And people, someone's commented on my hoodie. So yeah, it's got a proper DHL. Oh no, I stood away from it. DHL label on it. So there you go.
Yes.
And
I would say just the background that I've got here. Oh, sorry, Anna.
That's all right. You go. I'll go next.
The background I've got here is part of the campaign that you can see on the screen, which is if you're on Instagram, you should really follow Mia the pilot. She's one of our amazing pilots who works for our aviation team, and she's a strong supporter of breast cancer awareness. And she and another colleague from the UK, Jen, have basically created this 5 years ago, and it's grown and grown and grown to what it is today. So, you know, 2 individuals in our business, hey, they can create a movement. We can all do it.
We absolutely can create a movement. Anna, sorry, you were going to say.
Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you to everyone for coming. The fact that you've come and sort of and taken part, watched this shows that you care and you want to make a difference. You know, personally, I could have gone on for a lot longer, and there are so many complex parts to this. But, you know, I think the points we got across to hopefully make a difference. So thank you to everyone for coming.
I hope that in a few years' time, Working with Cancer gets to update the stats on the pledge, and that we see that people are not feeling so isolated at work, or, you know, they're not feeling afraid to tell their employers. You know, it shouldn't be something you should feel afraid of in terms of telling your employers. Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you, Sally.
Fabulous.
Thanks for setting it up.
Yeah, you're welcome. I'm delighted to. Thank you so much. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for having us.
Yeah. Thank you very much.